In studio with me now is Mariano De Alba, analyst, Venezuelan lawyer and expert in international law. Welcome back.
Thank you so much.
So we heard President Maduro calling for a national dialogue in order to resolve this political instability. How likely is that?
Well, right now it's kind of unlikely. Why? Because there were already in the past week some conversations which were advanced by the government of Norway between the government and the opposition. However, last week it was widely known that the security forces of the Venezuelan government had assassinated a person of the military who was against Maduro. That has caused a freezing of the conversations. The big issue here is that in the eyes, especially of the opposition, the Maduro government has not shown any concrete signal that it is really willing to find a solution to the crisis. Therefore, the price or the stakes to sit down again in the table without any real show of goodwill is really high. The big issue of the human rights report that was put forward by the UN is that it is given a door to the Maduro government to show that goodwill, like for example, freeing political prisoners and taking other measures that were recommended by the report.
Now, even despite these last efforts, we know obviously there are still sanctions in place and they have been ratcheted up in recent months. Tell us a little bit about where things stand with the sanctions and the scope of them.
Well, the country that has imposed fiercest sanction is the United States. Those sanctions are affecting not only the ability of the Venezuelan government to incur new debt internationally, but also the operations of the main industry of the country, which is oil. The other countries, Latin America and Europe, have only imposed sanctions against government officials, banning their entry to their countries and freezing their assets if they have on the other countries. So that's the situation right now. The UN report put yesterday, it is very clear in saying that the crisis is not a consequence of the sanctions, but however, the existence of the sanctions, especially the US sanctions, obviously have the effect of further exacerbating the humanitarian crisis that the country is living with.
So as you mentioned now, with the sanctions on top of the existing humanitarian crisis and the hyperinflation, what is everyday life like right now for Venezuelans?
Well, it's very dire. It's right now the big issue is that hyperinflation and the cost of goods. The situation of scarcity has gone better a bit, but people simply don't earn enough food to buy the staples. For example, the UN report put out yesterday said that the minimum salary per month was $7, the equivalent to $7. And that only allows people to buy 4% of a basic bag of goods. So that's the situation, and then you have other issues like, for example, personal insecurity, and obviously the thing that we saw over the last months, which is a downfall of public services, no electricity, very slow internet, blackouts, and so forth.
And obviously with that, a continuance of people fleeing the country. In fact, the Organization of American States predicts that the number of Venezuelans fleeing the country just in the year 2020 is going to outnumber the 6.7 million that have fled Syria over the last 8 years, essentially making it the largest migrant crisis in the world. What does that sort of rapid population shift do, not just to Venezuela, but the region, a lot of these surrounding countries?
Well, the region is also in crisis because of Venezuela, right? We have to remember that Latin American countries do not have the sufficient money or the sufficient infrastructure to deal with so many people. So what we have seen over the last weeks are certain countries, like for example, Peru and Chile, taking further measures to try to stop the flow of people, of Venezuelans into their country. Obviously, that's something that's difficult to do. They're trying to do it, and then there are countries which their door remains open, like for example Colombia, which is the country that has received the most Venezuelan because of the territorial proximity.
Now, we only have about 20 seconds here. If you had to give one issue that could really turn Venezuela's economy around, what should people focus on?
It's going to take a lot of international investment, and it's going to take a lot of help from financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund, and even help from certain countries who have the capability, like, for example, the United States and China.
All right, thank you so much for your insights. Mariano De Alba, analyst, Venezuelan lawyer, and expert in international law.